Sheena was also responding, saying that folks in the developing world need not to follow Western models, and the West needs to be looking to other cultures and traditional cultures for insights and clues, like the very audacious policy moves of Ecuador writing the rights of Mother Nature into the Constitution. Being audacious is something really called for in this work of cultural metamorphosis that we're all engaged in here. And, oh yeah, the internet. Big question to me, and one that puzzles me bunches. But because the thing can be so disembodying, and yet it's so filled with potential wonderment and magic. My hunch is that given the internet's ability to bring me into almost instantaneous contact with folks on the other side of the planet, and I think that it really will begin to bubble, and I can dance in it. And we all can begin to dance with it when and if and as we start rejuvenating oral culture. That is the culture of face-to-face storytelling that happens in place. The stories that we share about what goes on in, just on the street corner where that street lamp is buzzing on and off every time I approach it. But beginning to tell stories again, which is very old in us, very creaturely in us. But that's a local thing. Local culture is oral culture, the culture of storytelling, face-to-face storytelling. As we begin to replenish that layer of human community, then this much more is dazzling, electrifying matter of the internet can begin to serve, to play, to feed that kind of pulsating, pleasureful, erotic life that's being born and burgeoning again.
Just quickly, first on the question about developing versus developed economies. It's a trick of rhetoric to say one solution is to consume less in this particular situation, and then to say, well, what about that other situation? And therefore, if it doesn't apply in the other situation, it doesn't apply at all. We have to be really careful of that, I think, because we're not selling laundry soap. It's like we're not looking for one brand of laundry soap to sell to all people across the world. The fact of the matter is that consumption is a particularly American malaise, and that it's not our job necessarily to tell the developing economies to consume less, but it does apply to us. And another thing that will happen is that the developing economies will actually consume more. If I were a dad in a developing economy, I would burn coal to make sure that my little girl had electricity so that she could become literate. And therefore, in this question of climate, we're all in the same boat like never before. I mean, it's been a philosophical thing up until now, like all human beings are in the same boat, we're interconnected. But if somebody burns coal in the developing world, we're going to go down with the same ship, which means that because we cannot afford to burn coal because of the developed economies have put the carbon dioxide up in there. And if we want to save our own skins, what we are going to have to do is, and this is why conservatives deny climate change, by the way, is we are going to have to do some wealth redistribution. We are going to have to pay to get renewable technologies into the southern hemisphere because they can't afford them. And if we don't do it, we'll just go down this ship. The other thing, just quickly on the internet.
So real quick, so you want to...
Okay, quickly on the internet. The internet can cause, our brain, we get dopamine rushes in our brain when we make a friend on Facebook. But it's not this, but I have 5,000 friends on Facebook. If I break my leg, but if I break my leg, 5,000 people are not going to be coming to make me a cup of coffee because I can't get to the kitchen myself. So what we have to be careful of is that we'll get a brain rush from an internet friend that we don't, the same one as though we make a real friend. So what we have to, I think it's up to the engineers actually to be ethical and to make sure that those brain rushes we get from our internet apps actually cause us to engage in behavior that's good for us rather than just being empty calories.
so do we have 3 final questions for the panelists? Maybe we'll start here with this guy.
This panel seems to have very little room for capitalism as it is and systems that it creates. What role do you see for revolutionaries in the Marxist style, if you will, in getting any of that macro stuff out of your way?
Sir, did you want to?
Thank you. I have 2 questions. One is to Colin, money out of politics. How do you do it? I recently realized that I have been ignoring television ads, political ones, especially the PAC ads. I realized that that really doesn't help anybody except me, maybe. And that maybe we should start organizing voters to say to political candidates, we don't want those ads, don't spend money on it. That would be how much is enough for politics. So I would like your, maybe you have other ideas where you think this means. The other thing is, I think of myself as pragmatical, not ideological or religious. I have heard all these beautiful ideas. Would you tell us something about what you think are the limits of your ideas? How far they can go towards sustainability?
Okay, one final question.
Yeah, I know some of you don't live in New York, but Colin, you're professionally frugal. What do you tell your kids when they give you a hard time? And how do you prepare your kids for the coming age?
Okay. Jump on in, whoever wants to.
As first to the Marxist revolution, I don't believe in, if you've read George Orwell's Animal Farm, then you know that when the farm animals rise up and fight the way the humans did, they just become like the humans. So I believe in nonviolent change. As for money out of politics, I have to say I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that the people have tremendously more power than the corporations if they choose to use it. So, even though what always goes like, how do we do it? What I hear is your frustration, and I'm frustrated too. But what we have to do is keep trying. So, if you have any sort of civic, any tendency towards civic engagement, then be engaged. And one thing that's clear to me is that the money in politics offends true conservative sensibilities just as much as they offend progressive sensibilities because they interfere with individual liberty. So, I believe that ultimately the people of the United States will prevail, but we can work to make them prevail more quickly. Frugal versus consumption. First of all, let's not we've talked a lot about living thriftily and frugality versus consumption. Let's not make the mistake of thinking that frugality, or the term frugality, what we're calling, is the only alternative to consumption. There are many alternatives to consumption, and it's our challenge actually to find them. We're 4 people, and if the world is going to change, it's going to require a quest of all of us. So it's not like cookie cutters made out of sardine cans or consumption. There's this whole thing. And also, we're not talking about frugality of the human spirit. We're just talking about using fewer resources. As for my little girl and how I convince her not to consume, she said to me today, she said, "Dad, I want to watch Harry Potter." And up until now, every time anything we don't have a TV, but anything like Harry Potter, anytime it's come up, she's been I don't want to watch it, it's too scary. So I said to her, but you find it too scary, honey. I want to face my fears because all my friends are talking about it. I want to face my fears. She's 6. So this is a case of a very frugal man being very proud of his consumerist daughter. I'm not sure how we, I don't know how we stop our kids from consuming, but I think it's also really important. It's important not to be dogmatic. The next thing you know, we create an environmental dogma, and now we're fighting over environmental dogma. And somehow or another, I'm speaking as a father, not an environmentalist. I trust my little girl's spirit, and somehow or another, she'll grow up to serve the world, and it may not be the way that I serve the world, but to teach her what values I found to be important to me.
Yeah, a few things. This is a very